Well, welcome aboard the newspaper review segment on the show. It's another morning, and we have Mama V Owusu Abwaji, who's back.
Yeah. Good to see you too.
With all your bling bling this morning. Yeah, you're blinging.
Oh,
the earrings and the glasses and the new hairstyle and Charlie. I say elections and Ajo.
Well, thanks for holding it down yesterday.
Yeah, and I missed you though. Being on your feet the whole show isn't.
Girl had to sleep a little longer, Yeah, but we're back, and time for us to do the newspapers. We've got a couple of them in the studio. I've got the Daily Graphic, the Daily Dispatch, this is Republic Press. I can't help but say the Republic Press, Daily Heritage, and the Ghanaian Observer.
For my end, the Finder, Daily Guide, Ghanaian Times, Punch, and Daily Statesman.
Okay, shall we start with the Daily Graphic?
Let's
see what's on the front page of the Graphic today. President appoints transition team. There are people asking questions if it's the same governments, why the transition? But if you look at the statement that was issued by the communications director of at the presidency, he quotes some laws, and based on that's where this is coming from. But there are people asking lots more questions. Also, 111 MPs out of next parliament. That's a lot of parliamentarians who won't go back to the 8th parliament. Election violence under investigation, according to the Election Security Task Force. So here's James Opong-Brenu, the IGP, making that statement, but the banner headline, EC declaration precise, according to CODEO, a vote tabulation system employed by the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers to measure the accuracy of the 2020 presidential election result has backed the official presidential results declared by the Electoral Commission. So while CODEO's spiral vote tabulation methodology estimated that President Akufo-Addo would secure 50.98% of the total votes cast, the EC's official results stood at 51.302%. In the case of former President John Dramani Mahama, the PVT estimated 46.66%, with the EC's official results standing at 47.359%. CODEO's PVT methodology also estimated rejected ballots of 2.25%, which closely matched with the EC's figure of 2.23%.
The EC has come through with some correction on.
Yeah, so that's reflected. That's reflected in the figures that the Daily Graphic is quoting this morning. All right, let's check out the center spread. Brothers to sit either side of Ireland. This is the Jenapo
brothers.
John and Samuel.
But both of them are Abu.
Or Abdullah and Abu. One is Abdullah and one is Abu. So there's a spotlight on the two brothers. Story written by my big brother, Samuel Doe Ablo Depper, in the center spread of the Daily newspaper. Okay, also government business resumes, according to Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah. He says that President Akufo-Addo and his appointees have returned to work in full throttle a day after the declaration of the results of the December 7 presidential poll. And he says that this is to enable them to work with dispatch and wrap up government business for the year. And then the big one, I guess, you're probably waking up to the news that the NDC has officially rejected the results, described outcome as flawed, discredited. Now, this particular story was picked up from Haruna Idrisu's press conference, but yesterday, the former president, the candidate of the NDC, the flag bearer of the NDC, spoke himself. We will be filling you in on some of the things that he's been saying, but essentially backing what has been said already through the other officials of the party. Officially, they are not accepting the results. On the back page of the Daily Graphic, Climate Smart Cocoa Program initiated, and COVID-19 victims to commemorate first year of pandemic. That's an alliance of NGOs known as BHEC Africa. They've organized a candlelight memorial reception in remembrance of the people who have succumbed to the COVID-19 pandemic, and to also mark the first year of the pandemic. The rest of the story in the Daily Graphic on the back page.
Let's do the Finder newspaper now. And Akufo-Addo names 15-member transition team. Now, one of those on that transitional team is Yaw Osafo Mafo, senior minister. And I only bring it up because there's been a bit of a trend where some supposed members of the party are saying, so, Nana, are you still going with Yaw Osafo Mafo? I'm not the one saying it. Some alleged party members are saying that. Well, let's see how it goes. He's on the transitional team. The U.S. ambassador, Madam Sullivan, has been congratulating President Akufo-Addo on his re-election. All incidents of violence at polling stations being investigated. That's according to the IGP. EU mission condemns NCA's issuance of license to media owned or linked to politicians. And Ghana's active coronavirus cases stand at 892. And ECOWAS in there as well. So let me just take a brief, not a swipe, but a stab at two of the stories. Now, the EU's mission has condemned the NCA's issuance of licenses to media owned or linked to politicians. It has bemoaned the licensing by the National Communications Authority of commercial radio stations owned by politicians or linked to political parties, saying the act contradicts international standards. Now, according to the European Union, EOM, observer mission, that is, this can compromise the independence of the media through politicized contents used for campaigning. But I think, as of now, we're pretty much into it, Mama V. Now, according to them, in a preliminary post-election statement, the EU EOM observers identified at least 33 NPP-affiliated and 28 NDC-affiliated and 5 PPP-affiliated radio stations currently on air. So quite an issue. We keep talking about it. And look, I know come next year, more are going to spring up. Not that I actually have my foot on something. And I know many more are going to spring up from different quarters. The other one I wanted to do has to do with, again, the EU observer mission. 2020 election successful but dotted with trouble. And addressing a press conference organized yesterday to give a preliminary assessment of the just ended polls, the EU team leader stated that the EU observers had found that voting was well conducted with party agents present at polling stations and the counting was transparent. However, they noted there were isolated violent incidents during voting and campaigning. You can get more details of those stories on page 12 of the newspaper. Finally, over 40% of women in politics suffer verbal violence. And that is one that, should time allow, I shall get into. That's on page 5 of the Finder newspaper. All
right, let's do the Daily Dispatch now. Front page of the Dispatch says, Okoye is my favorite Speaker of Parliament. That's according to NDC's Inusa Fuseni. And they picked this from an interview that he granted me on our series, The Exits, which essentially is targeting members of parliament who aren't going back to the 7th parliament. Inusa Fuseni was the first person that I engaged, and we talked about many things, his work, beginning of, when he first entered parliament, the people he saw, how things have changed. And then I asked about his favorite speaker because he's worked under, I think, about 3 or so, or 4, maybe 3. And then he picked Professor Michael Okoye as his favorite, and he gave reasons for that.
Right.
He gives him the opportunity to share his views on the floor, and that's what's important. If you're in parliament and you don't contribute to matters, then have you come or you have gone. So
saying this brings to mind quite a number of them. Peter Alajete, Akufo-Addo,
yes,
quite a number of them.
Yeah, I think he worked under Akufo-Addo. Did he work under Alajete? I'm not sure, but Do Ajaho
that would be in the Akufo term.
Yeah, so I think he did 3 or 4. I have to go back to that.
We'll have to check on that.
Yeah. So the Daily Dispatch picking that and appropriately attributing it to myjoyonline.com. Here's another one. NDC's claim that president using military to overturn results false. That's according to Defense Minister Dominic Nitiru. EC on parliamentary seats. Number of seats won by political parties. It's essentially a recap of what has gone on. So they've got that of the parliamentary and the presidential results. And that's captured on the front page of the paper. On the back page, Akufo-Addo, Mahama, and the 16 region voting patterns. So more analysis in the paper today. But if you go to page 11, where they've got the full Inus Afuseni story, they also have this one that says the Member of Parliament for Asin Central constituency, Kennedy Japong, has expressed shock about the outcome of the 2020 presidential results of the National Democratic Congress. And according to him, with the developmental projects which have been executed by a Akufo-Addo-led government, he thought the NDC was going to lose the December 7 polls miserably, and miserably is in quotes. It is why he describes the NDC as smart, considering their political strategy. So there's a lot more to that. And then also MPP will have a tough time in Parliament, says Majority Leader Oseichi Mensah Bonsu. And he's been talking about how things would be a bit difficult. He says the 7th Parliament of the 4th Republican MP, 7th Parliament. It is sad and unfortunate that some of the party's best knowledgeable and experienced legislators are not returning to the House. So more of that in the Daily Dispatch newspaper today. Ben?
Well, the Ghanaian Times says presidential election result credible. That's according to CODEO, and pictured there Sheikh Arameyao Shaibu, acting chairman of CODEO. We reject presidential election, NDC insists. NMC commends media for election coverage. Now, if you get into the pages a bit, we're talking about incidents in Tamale yesterday. On page 3, irate GUM agents invade church, destroy property. And at least 300 irate agents of the Ghana Union Movement on Wednesday vandalized property of the party's flag bearer at his Life Assembly Worship Center Church at Odoko in Accra over non-payment of allowances. Then there's this one, 32 Odododiodo electoral violence suspects expected in court today. So that's a story I'll be getting into. But did you see that video when His Excellency the President, I think in the run-up to the election, was, a little rally there. He was addressing party faithful, and he raised the hand of Neelante Bannerman and said, and this is the candidate, vote for him. And his name, Neelante Vanderpoy. You know what I found so funny about it? The minute he said Neelante Vanderpoy, Neelante Bannerman looked at
almost like...
And he got the correction. I said, yeah.
Mr. President,
and someone had to prompt him that, my guy. African countries to receive COVID-19 vaccines early 2021. That's on page 5 of the Ghanaian Times newspaper. That's it for the Ghanaian Times.
Okay, all right, let's do Republic Press. Republic Press newspaper. And on the front page, Mahama rejects results as Akufo-Addo starts work. It says the National Democratic Congress flag bearer John Mahama has refused to accept President Akufo-Addo's election victory. He described the election results announced by the Electoral Commission as, quotes, fictionalized, on quotes. Here's another quote. I stand before you tonight unwilling to accept the fictionalized result of a flawed election, unquote. Mr. Mahama said at a press conference, what we witnessed across the country from Monday, 7 December 2020 exposed a deliberate plan to manipulate and predetermine the results of the election in favor of the incumbent candidate, Nana Akufo-Addo. So more of what he had to say in the paper today, but it's also got the correction that the EC had to make. After the declaration of the result, there was a statement issued. That's on page 4, a bit of that. It says the Electoral Commission has corrected the total valid votes put out during the declaration of results on December 9. The chairperson, Jean Mensah, declared the presidential candidate of the NPP as the president-elect based on a total of 13,433,573 valid votes instead of 13,119,460. But the statement also went on to say that even with the new figures, it wouldn't change the percentage. So that's what is here in the paper. The chairperson of the Electoral Commission inadvertently used, so just going back to how she used the wrong figures in the statement putting out what is supposed to be the right figures. This does not change the percentages stated for each candidate and the declaration made by the chairperson.
That still raises questions, though, about mathematical accuracy, because this could have turned anyway. And imagine if it had had any impact, what that would have meant in terms of even trust in the institution. So to get it mathematically wrong, I mean, I took my time when I started hearing of this and worked it out. And then I saw some reports coming through corroborating what I was thinking and all of that. And I realized, that's quite a serious one coming from the Electoral Commission.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to say about this also goes back to the deadline that the Electoral Commission gave itself, the 24-hour deadline to declare the result, and how it couldn't meet it, and how Jane Mensah had to come back midnight to apologize and explain the reasons. I kind of felt like, you kind of put yourself in some tight corner that nobody forced you there. You put yourself there.
Historically, in the Fourth Republic, no one has been forced to meet any timelines. So why box yourself into that situation?
And listen, Charlie, this one, the election, it's a huge matter, and we've seen it play out. So you've got to be absolutely sure with what you're doing, especially at that level. Other people could afford to make some mistakes, but not at that level. Because what do you want people to see? You want people to be convinced about what you have done. And the last thing you want to do is to quote the wrong figures when you've written it. It was a statement that she was reading, and then come back the following day and issue a statement. The inconsistencies, not good. Not good. This is a presidential election. There's a lot at stake. And when you do this, you give people room to question what you have done. And I really, really do hope and pray that all the lessons are being learned here. This is no joke. It's the whole country, whole country listening to you and watching you. And nobody's forcing you to come out at that particular time to come and do a declaration. So if you're not ready, don't do it.
I think the enormity of the situation, sometimes it gets lost on some people. And I think maybe with all the back and forth, there was a feeling, a need. And if you listen to the EC's chair, you realize that at some point, because that was a lengthy declaration, at a point it was beginning to get the points being made about the successes chalked and all of that. But it's really not about the EC chair. It's not about the deputies. It's not even about just the institution. It is about all of Ghana. And we're all at stake. So any little, mistake there could bode ill. But thankfully, at least we've had successful elections. CODEO, supporting that. The EU observer mission coming out with its own observations. But I think some of these little bits we can learn from.
So one last story in the Republic Press. It's picked on page 3, as in details of that story is on page 3. But this is the headlines on the front page. It says Peace Council team lashed at NDC headquarters. I'm just going to skip and go to the specifics where there is a quotes. So this is the National Peace Council chairperson who's talking. And there's a quote: "We were met with serious hostilities and violence at the NDC headquarters. As I speak now, board members who are part of the delegation are psychologically traumatized." This is Reverend Edu Jemfi speaking. He said their purpose for being at the headquarters was to sit with the party leadership to discuss the allegations of election malpractices made by the NDC and to find a way to peacefully resolve the differences for the sake of the country. The board were, however, able to meet the leaders of the National Democratic Congress after the incident who were rather cooperative. Unfortunately, the group march could not be discussed as members of the board were traumatized by the incident and will need ample time to regain composure before any discussions can proceed. Listen, sometimes little people such as us can give pieces of advice. In this period, the last thing you want to do is to hold a meeting with any leader of the NDC in their headquarters. Seriously. Plan the meeting elsewhere. It was a bad idea to go there.
I don't know what they were thinking, honestly.
Last thing you do.
Especially when...
That's home for their supporters, isn't it? And especially when you know that they haven't been happy about the result.
No,
you don't go there.
That is and not even just the result, even certain members of the group you represent. There have been, claims in the past about some of them, whatever, being this or that. So you might want to just give them time to, nurse their wounds, if you like, to lick their wounds and to calm down a bit. But to rush into this, well, I feel it was a bit of a rush, and maybe the tongue lashing they got might serve some purpose. But the Daily Statesman this morning, interesting one. Amewu begins construction of state-of-the-art palace at Uli.
Yeah, I saw that.
Talk about hitting the ground running. In 2024...
He hasn't forgotten how he got there.
In 2024, I am going to be looking out for Hoho. I'm going to be looking at what candidate the NDC will field.
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking at what gains Peter Amewu makes. And I'm going to be looking at the margins to find out whether there have been any gains, whether the MPP can hold that seat. Okay. I mean, it's an interesting one for me, and I'll be watching that constituency. Government satisfied with margin of victory in Monday's polls. This one, 7 got me laughing like a killer. Because, about the 10, I'm sorry for me, about the 10 percentage points that were spoken of, we're going to beat the NDC by 10 percentage points. I guess some of these show you that, Charlie, what our votes, Jane Abu. Be joke matter. I mean, I liked the fact that when Nana-Addo spoke while he was accepting the results declared by the EC, he sounded very conciliatory. So did CODEO Nkrumah. I just realized, wow, our politics. Now we're talking about working together in government business. It's good. It's good for Ghana.
I beg, when the thing is in your
It's good for Ghana.
What else? How else?
It's good for Ghana. But so the MPP has grabbed 137 seats, at least per what the EC has been telling us. 137. That means if you add the Fomena seat to them and the Fomena MP,
Fomena is not part of them.
Fomena, I mean, when I say add to them, I mean officially in Parliament. He's going to have to be either with the MPP or the NDC. He has to choose one side. He can't be.
No, but what's the fact
he's
today?
Going to align.
What's the fact today? The fact today is that he's not even a member of parliament. The fact today is that the MPP.
He is a member of parliament elect. Member of parliament elect. So that is that. With the NDC having 136 now, Senate West is yet to be decided. So that's another one there. That's it with the Daily Statesman.
All right, let's jump into the Daily Heritage newspaper. On the front page, it says, our parliamentary majority intact, according to the NDC, comes with a picture of its General Secretary, General Mosquito Johnson Asiedun Ketia. Also, MPP faces tough time in Parliament, says Oseiche Mensah Bonsu. Misuse of state resources evident at 2020 elections, according to the EU observers. And that story is here. Okay, we'll continue. Okay, so it says the European Union Election Observation Mission has noted that the misuse of state resources and unregulated campaign financing resulted in an unlevel playing field in Ghana's electoral process. The EU, in a preliminary statement on Ghana's December 7 presidential parliamentary elections, also mentioned that the polls were organized in an efficient and transparent manner and voters participated freely. Later this morning, we will jump into what our own SHRAJ, the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, has also said about the December 7 elections. Final one, Namomo takes Kromo seat from Fisheries Minister. That's also, yeah. I like the fact that it's one woman going and another woman coming in. That's
those coastal constituencies. Those along the coast. You joke with them. They will joke with your tenure. Maybe to wrap up, so you're done with your stack of papers then?
Yes.
Okay, so let me wrap up on these now. When you go to Punch, that story you started, MPP will have a tough time in Parliament, Oseiche Mensah Bonsu. He cites, according to him, it is sad and unfortunate that some of the party's best knowledgeable and experienced legislators are not returning to the House. And that's his point, basically, that the knowledge they've gained over time, the experience, all of that. Now you're going to have to build a different core, group of people who will have to fit in. Of course, Parliament has its own mechanisms when new members of Parliament come in to ensure that they are trained in the work of government. But this one, I wanted to send home a message. Whether you're on the losing side or on the winning side, you need to know how to conduct yourself. NPP victory, fan dead, another's arm severed from over-jubilation. And the story says, over jubilation arising from the declaration of Nana Addo as president, one person has been left dead with another's arm severed. The incident, which occurred at Obuasi Bosman in the Obuasi East District of the Ashanti region, was that of a tipper truck colliding with a motorbike. So let's all be on the lookout. The Daily Guide this morning, new faces in Parliament. You can check out the details there. Stephen Amwa, MPP in Shiaso. What's the name of that institution again?
Maslock?
Maslock. Rita Odolesowa in Dadekotopong, among others. You can check out the details in the Daily Guide newspaper. Let's do maybe one or two more stories. I wanted to do the one to do with women, so let's hear from you first.
Okay, so two things from the Daily Graphic, page 13. One says the National Election Security Task Force has said all the violent incidents recorded during this year's elections are being investigated. It said the outcome of the investigations would be duly brought to the notice of the public. Chairman of the task force, Inspector General Police James Opombuenu, at a media briefing at the Joint Operations Center at the CID headquarters in Accra yesterday, said despite all the measures put in place and the education of the public, some violent incidents involving many civilians were recorded. It must be emphasized, he said, and here's a quote, that the conduct of this year's elections was not devoid of some violent incident which nearly marred the smooth conduct of the elections. This resulted in 5 deaths and injuries to 17 people. 5 deaths, injuries to 17 people, including security officers. So, there's a lot more to that. I think what we haven't generally been happy about, that incident in Techiman where we saw the military. And that has to be thoroughly investigated and,
incidents which led Colonel Festus Abuaje, when I spoke to him yesterday, to describe it as the worst election we've had since '92. I felt it was maybe a bit harsh, but he goes on to justify, saying that we've never had an election with people dying and getting to this point. So if you have 5 people dying, 17 injured, then
that's a lot.
According to him, from the security standpoint, that's disastrous.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And he launched his book right before the elections, and one of the things he was saying was the involvement of the military in the polls. He had always mentioned that. I think it's consistent with what he said before the polls. So yeah, that incident, it takes the beauty away from it. There's also 111 MPs out of the next parliament. A total of 111 members of the 7th parliament will not return to the Legislative House for the 8th parliament in January next year. You see, it is not a secure job. Comes back to the people. So, okay, so I guess you continue with the women still in parliament.
So over 40% of women in politics suffer verbal abuse. I'll just do that very quickly so we can go online. Now, that's on page 5 of the Finder newspaper. It says about 46.2% of women in politics suffer verbal abuse as compared to the male counterparts. A research report by the Gender Center for Empowering Development, a civil society organization, stated. It also indicates that another 26.3% goes through psychological abuse. That's according to Mr. Henry Nikwao, communications officer of the GenStat, stating in Accra at the launch of the report. And look, when we have 46.2% of women in politics suffering verbal abuse, 26.3% going through psychological abuse, can we blame them sometimes when they don't offer themselves for, such positions? If you make it a very, what's the word, unfriendly environment for women, how does that, I was just reading yesterday, I've forgotten who was saying it, but the person was talking about how crucial it is to involve women in governance, in leadership. But I guess we still have a long way to go here in Ghana. But by and by, I think we're getting there. It's just that the gains are not being made as much as I would want. Look at the numbers in Parliament. If you look at the last Parliament and this one, pretty much.
The women is the same.
Pretty much
38.
Nothing has changed. Really.
In the 2016 election, we got 37, but there was a by-election that got Seyram
Lydia Al-Hassan
in Parliament, making the number 38.
In fact, now if you consider it, if it weren't for, I don't mean to sound inconsiderate here. If it weren't for the Mfansaman situation, it would mean that we would have less if it weren't for Mrs. Hayford replacing her husband.
Then we would have had two men. So if the NPP had won, if the NDC had won, it would still be a man. That's what you mean. Okay, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a caution in the Daily Graphic. This is coming from Dr. Kuma Abuaji, Ghana Health Service Director. He says post-election celebrations, Christmas can cause COVID-19 spike. He also mentioned schools reopening in January, as well as activities that will characterize the Yuletide celebrations, such as commercial and social activities and people traveling across the country as another risk factor for an increase in the disease. I guess we've got a big task ahead of us. And now that the elections, well, for now, are over, we probably would have to concentrate on drumming home the message of COVID is still with us. Whatever you do, you have to be measured. The NDC says that they will not accept a fictionalized election, that the election exposed a deliberate plan to rig. And so they're going to use all legitimate means to fight this. We're not sure if this would lead if this would lead to, you know, a petition like we saw in 2012, but the law is clear now. We know they have to do that if they're going to go to court with a petition. It has to be within 21 days after declaration. The declaration was when again? Ben?
So I think
that was 2 days ago.
9th. The 9th.
The 9th. And today is?
The 11th.
The 11th. Okay, so 2 days into the 21 days already. So we wait to see what they announce in the coming hours. I guess a lot will also unfold today because that press conference addressed by the flag bearer of the party was just last night. Right. So we will be digging into some of the matters. Again, with the revised, because a lot has happened since 2012. We know that it's going to be the person who says I should have won the election or I won against the person who was declared. So no third parties, if you like we saw in 2012. It won't be, if you like, John Mahama and others. No. There's, Akufo-Addo and others. So we wait to see how, things unfold in the coming hours. Do we have a bit of time to take our viewers?
I don't know about online, but what I'm going to do is just let you mention the Twitter trends for today.
Okay.
Now, Supreme Court, interestingly, is trending at number 7. In Scam We Trust is, trending at number 6. Then
in Scam
We Trust.
SCAM.
Yes.
Okay.
Like 419. Don't ask me.
I'm not getting mischievous. I just wanted
to check out the trends.
I just wanted to get the spelling.
But it is In Scam We Trust. Number 3 is #Mahama Do the Right Thing. Number 2 is Tamale, which was on fire a bit yesterday. And number 1 is Trump. Well, it's a wrap for the news review. Sports is up next with Oreku Ampofo. Thank you very much for doing this with me, Mamavi.
Have you turned like politician overnight? Like it's a new Benjamin Akapo I'm seeing this morning.
It's the political...
Or maybe I should go to Parliament.
You should, actually.
Okay, so like...
Should I give you a constituency?
Introduce me again. Like I just came on the show.
So this morning, we have the privilege of, having to sit with us, discourse on pertinent matters, legislator Mamavi Owusu-Abuaji. And she's going to be telling us about her plans in terms of winning the seat in her constituency again.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning to you and good morning to your viewers. Stay with us.